Another form of gaslighting might be you're in a disagreement and your partner says, I never said that. And then you start to wonder, did he really say that? And so it really becomes damaging as it erodes away your own kind of self-confidence, self-belief. And again, that intuitive feeling that kind of is in all of us to help guide us.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the biggest damage that comes out of gaslighting is that self-esteem hit that you no longer trust your gut, you start to question what you know to be true.
It feels so unsafe when you can't even trust what is going on in that internal voice of yours. Things begin to feel really unsafe. And this is when we see in my office women showing up with anxiety, right? Really feeling unsafe in their choices and decision making. This is where a lot of times people get stuck on, is this me? Is this relationship really unhappy because of me? Because the other thing that highly narcissistic people are good at is projection. And so they project their experience, their shortcomings, their own behavior onto their partner. And so when you combine the gaslighting and projection, you really start to develop a very scary and shaky kind of view of the world. And a lot of times that's the client we see, right, who doesn't even know who she really is anymore because she's been told she's critical and unreasonable and spending too much money or whatever the things are, when in fact it's actually the way her partner is behaving. But the projection onto her is starting to cause her to question, again, her own reality.
Yeah, and I think in that case, you bring up this fascinating the way you're framing this. It makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes when someone's projecting, it's easy to internalize that and make that your truth.
Absolutely. And here is the kicker. Most women who are attracted to narcissists or who narcissists are attracted to, I always say it's the women whose light shines brightly and they're like a moth. They're going to find it. They're coming to that light. And so these are women who typically are introspective, happy to take the blame when it's their fault. They typically are women who do not give up easily. So if you have been selected by a narcissist and you're in a relationship with one, genuinely, those are good women who want their relationships to work. So you hear it's your fault. And then they start to really be introspective about what part do I play in this? But you've got a partner who's not doing the same thing. So we're getting really out of balance on whose ownership is what. And that's, again, another classic tendency of highly narcissistic people. Cannot be introspective, cannot take ownership, and cannot hear any type of constructive feedback or criticism without having some type of response to it in the way that's going to ultimately end up with the other person feeling blamed.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, as you were talking about, you were describing the type of women who might end up with a narcissistic person. What came to mind was someone who's really more of an empath or highly agreeable or conscientious on the personality scale. Absolutely. And tend to be very loyal. A lot of loyalty.
Yes.
Yeah, they're committed. And I find with my clients that are involved with narcissistic people, they tend to really have a lot of hope that the relationship's going to get better.
Yeah.
That it can't get better if the person they're with can't take ownership or see their perspective.
Absolutely. We know that from just our training and background in couples therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have people who are able to take ownership of their own part in the relationship, we can't affect change. And we can't have a relationship where one person is trying, taking blame for things that don't belong to her. Ultimately, what we see happen is these women become almost a shell of who they know themselves to be. It is just a devastating relationship for them to be in. But that loyalty, that kindness, that can-do attitude that most of them have really keep them in these relationships for long enough to where they're ultimately, when I see them experiencing some type of traumatic symptomology, anxiety, hypervigilance, trouble sleeping, replaying events in their mind. There's lots of research that would say that it's a complex kind of PTSD that they're experiencing because it's so insidious and has been day in and day out. Some of it's so subtle that to an untrained eye would never even look like any type of abuse.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can totally agree with you on that. I have so many clients who come to me, and it takes a lot of courage to be at that state, have your self-esteem kind of completely diminished from this relationship, but have the strength somewhere inside you that you can pull from to exit the relationship. I'm amazed by it every time I see it in my clients.
Me too.
It's inspiring.
It's really the resiliency of the human spirit that we get to witness. But other tragedy, right? A lot of times these women that I see have kind of been isolated from their family and friends. So their support network is lacking, because that is one of the tactics of a more narcissistic personality, is kind of to isolate and control. So they don't have girlfriends who have seen what's going on. They've become a little more distant sometimes from their parents or their siblings. And so you're right, to decide this isn't healthy, this isn't working, and they're not having people in their ear telling them this isn't healthy and this isn't working. It's incredibly courageous for them to take the step of trying to understand what is going on.
Exactly. Okay. So for you, when you've been working with someone who is trying to exit a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, what strategies do you think really works for them? What works best?
Well, honestly, Sherry, one of the strategies that works the best is a support group. These people, these women, need to be in a group of other women who can support and validate their experiences and offer connection to them in a time in their life where all of their kind of attachment system insecurity is going off. It's one of the reasons I love your groups so much. I do believe, the power of those groups allows these women to understand they are normal, right? They are not the narcissist. That's the other thing. I'm sure you hear it.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many women are convinced that they're the narcissist in the relationship.
Yeah.
And trying to help them unwind from that. Unwind from that programming. But you mentioned my group. My group I have right now, probably of the 8 women, probably 6 of them are coming out of relationships with narcissists. And you're exactly right. It's the first time they're actually hearing from other women that are going through exactly what they're going through. They've been going through.
Yes. I had a client who came in and described a very typical kind of narcissistic relationship. And I asked her, had she ever heard of narcissism? And she hadn't. And she went home and did research. And it's like this light bulb moment for her of like, oh my gosh, other people experience this in their relationships too. She said she just read online lots and lots and lots of stories, and that they just were so familiar and so helpful for her and for all people going through a relationship or ending a relationship with a narcissist to kind of validate, wow, I'm not making this up in my head. This is real.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Is there anything else that you have on your list
Another thing that I recommend, so a lot of times, and I think this is a term you taught me, I see people in pre-contemplation, right? They're not sure if they're going to leave the relationship, but it's starting to kind of become a little seed in their mind. And when I see people in that position, and it sounds as if their partners displaying, pretty significant narcissistic tendencies, I recommend they start a journal, because they can write down situations as they occur. And then as they go back to see them, it reminds them, oh, I did experience that thing in a way that my partner refuses to acknowledge. that is one of the ways I want them to start working towards recognizing the gaslighting and the projection.
I love that idea, because that in turn, they can kind of see the pattern. I think when you're in it and you've lived it for so long, and it's so easy to try to, because there's a cycle of abuse that happens, and the cycle is, it starts out with love bombing, which we can talk about a little bit more what love bombing is. Starts out with love bombing, and then the tension will start to build, and then the abuse happens, and then there's remorse, and then it kind of goes back to love bombing. And when you've lived that cycle for a while, you tend to, when you're in the love bombing phase, you can tend to think, oh, that is not going to happen again. That's over now. I have that sweet man back that I fell in love with, So yeah, just keeping a journal will really help you see the pattern.
Exactly. And the problem with that cycle is it becomes almost addictive. It's like playing slot machines in Vegas. As long as you get a little bit of positive reward, our brains are wired to keep trying. And so that, as you said, that love bombing where they just feel perfect. They feel like your soulmate. This is wonderful. Look how awesome he is, right? So you get hooked back in, and then the devaluing starts. They start to criticize, notice things they don't like about you. You may try to bring them up. That's going to cause a huge problem. Lots of word salad, lots of denial, lots of like crazy making and that type of conversation. And then at some point, that discarding phase of silent treatment, which again is so damaging. There's research out that says silent treatments by our partners are more damaging to us than domestic violence. It is such a threat to our attachment system. So the silent treatment happens. Usually it's the non-narcissistic partner that comes back and tries to make amends and apologizes and wants things to get better because things feel so terrible. And then we're back in our cycle.
Yeah. And honestly, as you were talking about the silent treatment, it can feel like emotional abandonment.
It is emotional.
When you're in that position, you're the recipient of the silent treatment. It can it can trigger some old stuff.
It is emotional abandonment. And, at the end of the day, our nervous systems, our attachment systems are pretty young. And so it kind of feels like a 3-year-old who needs reassurance, needs someone to love and take care of and restore this fracture in the relationship. And the silent treatment for some people can go on for a very, very long time.